All right, let's talk about something huge, something that's been part of human life for, well, forever, prayer. But what if we could pull back the curtain? What if we could see what's actually happening inside our own minds when we pray? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at this ancient practice through the lens of some really modern science.
I mean, it's the big question, isn't it? When a person is deep in prayer, what is going on in that incredible 3-pound universe inside their head? Is it some unique, mystical state? Or is it something our brains are already built to do?
And here's where it gets really fascinating. It turns out prayer isn't just one thing. It's not a single button you push in the brain. The way you pray completely changes what happens neurologically. The how is everything.
So to really get this, we've got to start with how psychology even looks at faith these days. The goal isn't to prove or disprove anything. Instead, scientists are trying to understand the mental software, the programs and processes that make beliefs such a powerful part of who we are.
You see, from a scientific point of view, faith isn't some kind of glitch. It's more like a sophisticated feature of our minds. It's a mental toolkit we use to handle our emotions, to connect with others, and to make sense of this crazy world. And prayer? Prayer is one of the main ways we actually use that toolkit.
Okay, so how do scientists analyze this software? Well, they use a few powerful frameworks. You can think of them like different lenses on a camera. Each one helps bring a different part of the picture into sharp focus.
And for our purposes, we're going to focus on 4 of the big ones they use to understand the psychology of belief. So first up, you've got attachment theory. This suggests we relate to God kind of like a super parent, a source of security. Then there's attribution theory, which is all about how we see a divine hand in the things that happen in our lives. Religious coping theory looks at prayer as a legit strategy for dealing with stress. And finally, cognitive science explores the idea that our brains might just be naturally wired to look for purpose, which makes faith feel really intuitive.
All right, so with that background, let's zoom in on the act of prayer itself because, like we said at the beginning, it's not just one thing. In fact, psychologists have broken it down into 4 very distinct types.
Okay, now what's wild about this is just how different the results are. At the top, you've got meditative prayer, just kind of thinking about or listening for God. That has the strongest link to well-being. Right there with it is colloquial prayer, basically talking to God like a friend. That's also tied to happiness. But then, look at the bottom 2. Ritual prayer, the memorized stuff, has the weakest link. And get this, petitionary prayer, where you're asking for things, is actually linked to higher anxiety, probably because you only do it when you're already stressed out.
And this chart just makes it crystal clear, right? The impact on how you feel is just totally different depending on how you pray. The conversational, personal styles show this clear positive bump. The other 2 barely move the needle, or even tied to feeling anxious.
So the bottom line is pretty simple. Not all prayer is created equal. It's not a magic button you press for the same result every time. The method you use, the how, totally changes the psychological outcome, which brings up the big question, why? What is going on in our brains that makes them so different?
And to answer that why, we have to zoom in even deeper. We're moving past psychology and getting right into the neuroscience. Thanks to brain scans, we can literally watch what the brain is doing during these different kinds of prayer.
Now, to get this next part, you need to know about one key concept: theory of mind. It sounds complicated, but it's super simple. It's our ability to imagine what's going on in someone else's head, their thoughts, their feelings. It's what makes us social, and it turns out it's at the very heart of prayer.
And this is the big reveal. When people are doing that conversational, off-the-cuff kind of prayer, their brain scans light up in the social cognition network. These are the exact same parts that fire up when you're having a chat with a friend. You are literally simulating a social interaction. But when they switch to reciting a memorized prayer, that whole social network just goes quiet. Instead, the parts of the brain for memory and routine tasks take over. It's not a social activity at all anymore.
So, how can you remember this massive difference? Well, the researchers who discovered this came up with a really simple, kind of perfect analogy that just makes it all click.
Just think about that for a second. When you're writing an email to a friend, your theory of mind is working overtime, right? You're thinking about how they'll react, what jokes they'll get. You're imagining their mind. It is a deeply social act. But reciting the alphabet? That's just pulling data from a file. It's an automatic memory task. You don't have to think about what the letter G is feeling.
And that's really the core of it all. One type of prayer is a relationship simulation. It's exercise for the social parts of your brain that are tied to feeling good and feeling connected. The other is just memory recall. It's like pulling a file out of a cabinet. So what do we walk away with? It leaves us with this one last, really powerful thought. If the types of prayer that make us feel happiest are basically our brains running a social relationship program, what does that tell us about what it means to be human? Maybe it suggests that our deepest, most fundamental drive, the one that shapes everything from our brains to our beliefs, is just that simple, profound need to connect with another mind.